Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside Voices. We're going to give it a minute or so to let everybody join the call. Hi, Raquel. I see you. Oh, there's a lot of you. Hi, friends. All right, so while we're waiting for people to join, show of hands or stand up. Who's got a Zoom mullet going on? Business on top and boxers on the bottom. Anyone? Or is everyone fully dressed for? Okay. Emily.
I even showered.
Did you?
Yes.
You know, I showered yesterday and washed my hair specifically because I looked in the mirror and I was like, good Lord, you cannot be on Zoom tomorrow without doing, I don't even know how many days it had been. But I am wearing pants in case anyone's wondering. If you're not wearing pants, that's okay. You're come as you are. You're welcome here. Just be careful to not let everybody see that, because that would be unfortunate for a lot of reasons. I mean, maybe it would work out in your interest too, since I think like online dating's like stalled a lot. So maybe that's going to be your, like what you do. We have a poll that we're going to put up. Susie's working on a poll where we're just trying to get a sense of where you're all at in terms of like applying for funding, not applying for funding, thinking about pivoting, not pivoting. So we're going to still just wait a minute or so and let more people come up. And Susie, do you want to launch that poll right now? Is that possible?
I got to create it first, but I'll be right there.
Great, perfect. And while we're getting going, I just want to take a minute to introduce co-hosts this week. So this week we're talking about pivoting, and so I have two guests who each bring sort of a different perspective. So Byron actually went through a whole process of having to pivot and strategically reevaluate his business to prevent it from failing a couple years ago. So he's going to bring that real world experience and talk about that. And then Sarah does a lot of consulting and supporting businesses through their growth, project management, strategy. So would either one of you like to say a little bit more about yourselves than what I just said?
Sure. I'll go. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you with or without pants. Again, I'm Byron Walker. I have a company called survivalfrog.com. It's an e-commerce store. We sell mostly to consumers selling survival gear. Started 11 years ago, and we've had a few ups and downs along the way, but it's been a great business to run. In 2017, we were doing a little bit over $9 million in revenue. And then the entire survival market did a huge correction and went down about 70%. So it's drastic, devastating. Took out about half of my competitors along the way. And we went from 9 million down to 3 million over about a year. And so it was complete hell. Lost lots of money, lost about 20 employees along the way, had to lay them off. Honestly, it was just pure hell. But what we did is we created a turnaround plan, and whether you call it a pivot or a turnaround, we basically executed this plan. So cutting expenses, simplifying the business, worked on margins, we shut down the office. We basically restructured the whole company. And we completed the turnaround about this time last year. So May of 19 was our first profitable month. $85, by the way, best $85 in my life. But here's the thing. Now, after May, we started seeing profits that were the same as before the downturn. But now we do it on 1/3 of the revenue. So we tripled the profit, the net income at the end. And we're a physical products company. So, it was hard to do, obviously, but getting through that turnaround, it was the best thing that could have happened to the company. Best thing that probably could have happened to me too, because I learned a lot along the way. And now we're profitable. Now we came into this COVID-19 situation, and as you could probably guess, business is booming. So now we're riding that wave up, but now we have a solid company that's strong and efficient, and now we're riding the market back up. So hopefully I can share a few ideas on how to turn around a business and wait for the market to come back.
Great, thanks. Thank you for that. Sarah, you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Sarah Wood, and I started a new business in January. I have a background that's a bit varied, from nonprofit work to the music business to owning a small business in the past, and in film festival world with 5 Point Adventure Film, if anyone has been to that event in the outdoor world here. And so when I most recently was VP of Operations at Industry 9, which is kind of a case study in pivoting itself, because the 9 means they went through 8 other businesses before they became Industry 9, which is a high-end cycling component manufacturer in North Carolina. And I kind of finished up some big projects there and was ready to do my own little pivot. And so I did. And now we're here in COVID, and I only had like 2.5 months of a new business starting, and considering what other things I can do. So what I've been doing most recently, though, is I do have some clients. I have some contracts I was able to land before everything kind of went south, and luckily those are in some businesses that are still doing quite well right now, amazingly. And but I've been coaching and volunteering some time helping businesses through this process. So whether it's helping them decide whether they need a loan, helping them go through that process, or just helping them with their strategy, like what's next, what do I do? And so some of that has been specifically in the outdoor industry with some brands who have decided to produce PPE, and kind of pivoting their manufacturing over. So working on a project currently to help connect those manufacturers with their suppliers. And we're going to be launching that tomorrow. So we're excited to kind of have a new product coming out. It's free. So, spending a lot of time on something that I'm not going to get any revenue on, but it's the right thing to do. And I think just in general, the right thing to do right now in collaboration. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Thank you. So for those of you who joined last week, you know the structure, which is basically we're gonna take your questions through chat. We ask that people stay muted because there's so many humans that if you're not muted, it actually becomes impossible to hear. We have a survey that we want to send out that I don't see anywhere. Susie, get it. I don't have that on my screen. We may not get that. The reason why we're doing pivoting this week and not fundraising, so a lot of you in the poll that I sent out, it was kind of even between like how to pivot and fundraise. I don't think we're there yet to understand all the creative ways of fundraising because the demand for money is so significant. And I think that it would be a disservice to all of us to talk about how to get money before we talk about what are our businesses going to look like in a few months. I was on a call on Monday with Missy Park, who's the CEO and founder of Title IX, and she said something that really resonated with me. She said, none of our businesses are going to look the same in a few months. No one's going to come out of this looking the same. There is no returning to normal. And so when I think about how to manage our cash flow, where we're going to get money, how we're going to do sales, like all of the money part, there's also this strategy that I think is really important to sort of start working on. So that's what the point of this call is going to be. Give me 1 second. I just don't have that button, Susie. That's the only problem. So we don't have a poll. That's okay. We'll do it another time.
Jen,
yeah.
What I was going to suggest is you could have people you could verbally ask the poll and have people just put it in the chat, and we can save the chat information.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
A lot. Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is just sort of jump right into questions, because I think that this call is going to be most productive if all of you can ask the questions that you have about how to evaluate your business, whether you're a freelancer, a nonprofit, a small biz, you know, what steps you need to take, what you should be looking at. I'd like to start with opening up to questions, and then I think where Sarah and Byron will come in is to be able to give some of their experience and some of their advice around that. And also, this is sort of an open dialogue, so feel free. Like, we've had a great group using chat, so why don't we, I'll be facilitating all the questions, and I'll be asking them of Sarah and Byron, so the two of you don't need to keep track of them. I will. But let's.
Well, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I just wanted to kind of, sorry, I just opened a window in front of your face. I just wanted to, I guess, just say a little bit more about the comment you just made about nothing's going to be the same. And part of the process, I think, as business owners that we have to go through, and Byron, you did this, you know, back in 2017, probably, is just kind of reevaluating, you know, what do I have? What are my skills? What identity am I tied to right now that I'm going to have to let go of potentially? And that process of just letting go of some expectations. We all came into 2020 thinking something completely different than we're thinking right now. And, you know, understanding what that's done as far as our emotional state, what that does for us, and what we need to do to kind of pull up our bootstraps and say, okay, this is a whole new world I'm diving into over the next several months. What skills do I have that I can pull in some cases out of the woodwork? What am I not using now that I actually have used in the past that I can kind of sharpen and bring back into this new world that we're heading into? And I think we have to be ready to go through this multiple times. Like, there may not only be one pivot here. There may be 3, there may be 4 pivots before we land into what is kind of what we could call it predictable again. Because right now we have left a somewhat predictable landscape and we're heading in to an unpredictable landscape. And so we may be in that unpredictability for a while, and we have to be prepared for that.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to start moving over to questions. So Hannah wants to know, pre-revenue startup, if you can qualify for assistance. If you don't have payroll, no, not as a startup. You need to actually, and this is last week's call was all about assistance funds. So that's on YouTube. I've shared the link. Definitely go watch that video, because Kristen York from the Sierra Business Council answered a lot of these questions. So PPP is for, like, you can apply as an independent contractor if you had money coming in that way. You need to weigh that against unemployment. And then the EIDL requires you to actually, like, have been in business and had revenue. All of this had to have been prior to, I want to say, like, beginning of Feb. So Hannah, go check out all of this is on the SBA loan. And then also check out that video, because that's all there. Raquel, you're welcome. Raquel has a question. And this is actually something that I've been thinking about too. How do you know when it's time to pivot versus stay the course? Are there any specific numbers, metrics, things to be looking at of, like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing what we've always been doing versus now it's time to make a change? Do either of you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Either way, staying the course, as you mentioned before, isn't the same course. So that's something to remember. And so if you are going to stay the course, you're probably going to have a new cost structure and new set of expenses that match that new revenue, which is staying the course. As far as pivoting, one thing I would say about pivoting is try to stay only one step removed, because it depends on how you define pivoting, really. That's kind of a broad statement, but if you do pivot, try to stay one step removed. Okay, so what that means, let me give you an analogy. So if someone owned, let's say a year ago, someone owned a seafood restaurant, and their seafood restaurant is doing great. They want to expand. Do they, A, go into the seafood wholesaling business? Or B, do they go and open another steak or open another restaurant, which is a steak restaurant? And the steak restaurant is actually just one step removed. So that is actually a closer pivot as opposed to going in and starting a wholesaling business, which is totally different. So new, totally different contacts, industry knowledge, customer database, everything. Okay, so being one step removed will help you with any type of pivot because you can probably utilize your existing customer list, and you can certainly still use and benefit from your vast, network of people in the industry.
That's interesting. Don't try to go too far off. You need to stay within sort of the initial scope.
One step removed, not two, or worst case, 3 or 4. Not
right.
saying it can't be done. It's just harder. The further you get away from your core business, the harder it'll be because you as a business owner, you have so much knowledge already in this field. To go into a totally new field it's just one more thing that you're going to be battling against.
Yeah. I want to address Kelly's comments about if anyone's received EIDL or the PPP, because I think that actually works into this conversation. I talked to my SBA guy in Reno today. He says he doesn't know anyone. As we think about what is the path forward, it's likely in everyone's best interest to not plan on getting any of that money and to think about any of this relief funds to be pennies from heaven. So once again, this talks, we'll talk about fundraising another time, but counting on the SBA loans, counting on the PPP, that might be one version of your financial projections that you have. So having multiple scenarios of projections would be that's what I'm personally working on. But I wouldn't literally would not bank on that as well.
I think that's great advice, Jen. And that's something that tying back into Byron's comment too, you need to be making multiple scenarios here, because next week you might be walking in and saying, you know what, I actually have a plan for that scenario that we're walking into next week that we can't predict that is going to be the case. Or 2 months from now, you can pull a different scenario out that you worked out. Think about all of the possibilities, whether you stay the course, whether you iterate, whether you have an interim strategy, or whether you do a spin-off. I mean, there are a number of levels of pivoting, and that's kind of what Byron was getting at. You can go far or you can stay close to home. And when to know to do that is based on these projections and based on these scenarios and modeling and what your basic needs are, and really identifying those first.
Your cash flow statement should be your best friend right now. So if you don't what I like to do personally is I like to have my historical P&L. And then I like to project out at least a year ahead of the P&L. And then all of that automatically feeds into a cash flow statement. And I have different versions saved, which I'm really careful about save as and giving them new names and being really careful so I don't confuse versions, making sure my tabs are clearly labeled. But, when and how you do things your cash flow statement's going to tell you when you better fucking figure something out, because you're either going to have money or you're not, right? So I just think that getting your financials in order now and running these multiple scenarios is going to give you an idea of what you can do, what you need to do, when you need to do something. Without it, you're sort of just blindfolded, dark room, that thing that people say, you know what I'm saying? You're just not going to work out well.
Hey, Jen, can I just touch on that real quick? The cash flow, what I call cash flow forecast, same thing, statement, that before my downturn, I had never done one. So I had literally ran a business for 7 years without one because cash was good and didn't have to worry about it. Now P&L and all that's different. Of course I had those, but I didn't have cash flow forecast. And so one of my friends told me during my downturn was stop managing your business on the P&L and start managing your business on the cash flow forecast. Mm-hmm. And that was some of the best advice I got along the way. And what I call the cash flow forecast, the nickname to it, is my sleeping pill. Because I would literally be able to say, you know what, I might freaking go out of business. In fact, I probably will, but it's not going to happen in the next 3 weeks. And that allowed me to take a deep breath and just relax, because I knew I had a 3-week or whatever it was, 4 or 5 week runway, because the cash flow forecast clearly showed that to me. So cash flow forecast and diving into your financials is critical in all times, but especially in the downward time.
And if that seems really daunting to a lot of you, you can think about doing it sort of like at a high level. So when you think about how you keep your books, and everybody has this, whether you're a freelancer or you're a business, like everyone has, you have your revenue and you have expenses. So at some level, you know, money coming in, money going out. You can make sort of bigger buckets. Like you don't have to necessarily get like really granular on it, but to understand those big buckets and then how they play into your cash flow is big. I'll let Sarah speak to this, and then Emily, I'm going to get to your question, which I know is up there.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. You know, you cannot sit here in today's scenario and say, oh, financials aren't my thing. Financials have to be your thing. They have to. You just can't sit back and use that excuse anymore. And I hear it all the time, like all the time. And I hear, well, I don't know how to use QuickBooks, or I don't know how to use Excel. Well, you know what? You better start, because you're not going to be able to pay a bookkeeper for a while. You may not be able to pay your accountant to help you right now. They may offer you some help, but it is fully on your shoulders, and you have no excuse not to dive in. And on top of that, once you do that work and you kind of see your cash flow and you do the projections and the forecasting, now with all of your scenarios you're lining up, you need to put a time frame on those. How quickly, if you have this idea to pivot and you feel like, you know, that's a direction you might need to go at a certain point, how long is it going to take you? What kind of money is it going to take to pivot? How are you, you know, you then have to plan that far in advance to say, well, you know what, this is my milestone. If I don't have X revenue by this date, my cash flow is going to run out in 4 months or 3 weeks or 2 days. How quickly can you try the new direction? You need to have that planned out and thought through.
Yeah. So I want to go up to Emily's question, which I don't really know if there's a great answer for you, but her question is, how do you continue to find the energy, physical, mental, to follow through with this new strategy when you feel like the mountains are insurmountable?
That's where your friends and family come into play. And if you have a great therapist that you can still afford, because honestly, we all have a different level of this. And I think that's actually a really good point, even on this call, that we need to be kind with each other, because we're all in different stages. We all deal with it differently. No one is having the same experience here. And, you know, I've often been kind of like slapped on the wrist a little bit sometimes. Like I go to a funeral and I want to celebrate the person's life, and they're like, you're supposed to be fucking sad right now. And I'm like, you know what? I want to celebrate this person's life. And in this scenario, I want to inspire and help people move forward and light that fire under their ass, because that's what's going to move our economy forward. So you have to find out what that is for you and lean on your network, because everybody needs that right now and everybody's willing to give.
So in an effort to be able to get to everyone's questions, I'm just going to ask Sarah, if you have something for both of you to add, go ahead and add it. If not, I'm just going to keep running through the questions because I don't want to run out of time. Like I would say, like, Emily, just wake up every day and figure out what it is you're going to do that day and get that one thing done, and then call it, and then go to bed. And then you're going to get back up the next day and you're going to do the things you're able to do. And then you're going to go to bed. And then you're going to wake back at, like, you can't, like, don't think about doing this, like having to do all of it every day, or that it all has to get done. We can't be overly productive right now. You just have to like pick the things. So I'm going to go up to Candy's. I see everyone's questions. This is a great question. Can you walk through your process for deciding what expenses to cut and where to continue investing in your business? What do you cut? What do you keep spending money on?
Yeah, I can address that. Obviously, it's going to be different for every company. And I think deep down, you probably know the answer to this question. And so what I suggest is take all of your expenses, dump them into an Excel spreadsheet and color code them. So basically create 3 buckets. The red are the expenses that you could cut right now. The yellow are, I don't know, or it's hard, or, you know, unknown. Green is critical infrastructure that you can't cut. And then cut the red now, because I will tell you, cutting expenses is not a light switch. It takes several months for it to seep into your budget, because you prepay that month, or there's a 3-month agreement, or whatever it is, right? So cut them today to benefit from that in, you know, a month or 2. Then look at the yellow and find a way to put those on pause or delete them completely. And sometimes just the pause is easy enough to kind of get over. And so one thing that we did with some of the critical software that we thought was critical is we said, okay, we don't want to get rid of this, but what if we put it on a pause for 6 months? And then if I got a lot of pushback, I'd say, okay, how about 30 days? 30 days, we can live without this software. And so we would do that. And sure enough, 30 days later, we're like, we don't need it. Was it nice to have? Yeah. Did it give us some good KPIs? Yeah, but it wasn't critical. Okay. And then even look at the green bucket, which has the critical infrastructure inside of it, and really second guess that as well. For example, having an office was in my green bucket, you know, or paying rent, I should say. So paying rent was in that green bucket. I had to pay rent, right? Well, I went virtual and found a subtenant and got out of my lease. Oh, I didn't get out of it, but, you know, got that off the books, and that was huge for me. So really critically look at those and try to cut as much as you can. You can always bring them back later.
I mean, I think you're hearing like get an Excel spreadsheet open and like make sure you have it there. I just want to say for me personally, like what will I continue to invest in? Only things that drive revenue. If it doesn't drive revenue, I'm not going to spend money on it. One of the upsides, because let's try to be positive for a moment about this whole thing, nothing has to be polished and perfect anymore. So these like big spends on production, and I know that there's people in here who are gonna be like, fuck you, Jen, you're like, this is what I do. So no, I'm not trying to like upset you or like say that your business isn't important, but for people who have to cut immediately, you can literally take to Instagram stories from your phone in your living room and have a conversation with your customers or your community, and no one's going to judge you for that. And so, you know, this is where like understanding like what it doesn't have to be perfect. It never had to be perfect in the first place, but it certainly doesn't need to be anymore. I'm going to keep running through questions. So, Jess' question, she's deeply ingrained in tourism in a gateway community outside of Yellowstone, portrait photographer and vacation rental manager, and struggling with how to shift her goals. Any general thoughts or suggestions on how to move forward? Sarah, do you want to take this one on shifting goals? And we have about 4 other questions, so let's.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, you still have skills that are needed. So the big point here is that just because your customer base that you identified with pre-COVID-19, that doesn't mean you have to stop doing what you're good at. Now, what skills can you attach to what you're doing, and what customers need those right now? And we still need content, and the media is still hungry for stories, and they're still hungry. Now, the property management, yes, that's difficult. However, there are still people who need the same type of skills that are required by property management, whether it's a clinic or a healthcare institution or some elderly people in your community that could use some help, that they would gladly, you know, throw you a few bucks to help them with. And I'm totally spitballing because I don't know what kind of property management you do, whether it's just flipping an Airbnb or actually, you know, servicing sprinkler systems. But, you know, just remember that your skills are still useful. You just have to kind of think about a different audience.
And we've talked about this on previous calls, this idea of social capital and how those relationships and the network that you have, like that will serve you in the future. So for a lot of people, this is about like, how do you get through the next few months? Because you'll be able to provide your services starting again, once we don't have to, once things sort of open up a bit. So I would suggest like thinking about how you maintain those relationships and think about that during this time, so that once we do get to a position where money's flowing again, you've maintained those relationships. And so really your financials, you're looking at like not having revenue come in now or over a certain number of months, but then anticipating it coming, and you're maintaining those relationships. Byron, I'm going to pump this one to you. This is from Stefani with cash flow. How do you decide when is an inflection point with unpredictability? For example, in thinking about cutting costs, I have inventory in the shipping company warehouse. How do I decide whether to have them ship my inventory back versus paying monthly storage costs, since we don't know when the sales will begin again? So how do you make that decision around the unpredictability?
I'm not sure how to answer that question other than building out forecasted P&Ls, and really just looking at so I just take my P&L and then throw it into an Excel and then cut the revenue down to whatever I think it will be in the future. And it's either what it is today or what you think it'll be in 3 months. I would cut it in half and just see what that looks like, and then cut your expenses below that so that you can get to break even. And then for that specific question, obviously you're going to just play that role out. What if I didn't have that storage cost on my P&L forecast? Does that get me to where I need to be? How much of a help does it really provide? Because it's going to have to be it's obviously that's a big project, sounds like. So it'd have to be a pretty nice chunk of money that's going to be coming back to you or not going out the door.
Yeah. It's a lot of time on spreadsheets, a lot of scenarios. Like, here's one scenario, here's another one. Like, I keep joking around, like, I'm going to have like plan A through ZZ, so I think like in your financials should reflect all of those different plans, and you should have a different spreadsheet for every single one so that you can reference them and you don't lose your work.
And just real quick, I was that guy who, financials, I'd read my P&L and I knew how to read them, but I wasn't a numbers guy. I wasn't a financial guy. And I am now. When there's a gun to your head, you figure it out.
Sarah, what did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, I'll share a couple resources in the chat and also in the Google sheet of some financial books that are just good for beginners or good for people trying to get their chops back up. And don't forget to ask for the discounts. And I think that was mentioned in the first call.
Amanda.
Amanda, where it was, your phone bill, your rent, people are willing to give a little bit now and give you a little break. So don't be shy about asking for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim has a question here. That they've predicated their business on in-person training, so with a lot of peer-to-peer interaction, and moving to web-based delivery is difficult because they've been telling customers how much better in-person training is for retention of the content, and they've made in-person interactions a core principle of the brand. They're ready to deliver live webinars, but will need to backtrack on communication. Any suggestions?
Our new reality, honestly.
Yeah, it's so okay. Yeah. Hi, Jim.
Yeah,
I just think this, your competitors all of us, our competitors are facing the same circumstances. So it's less about how my business, I don't know, how should I say this? At the end of this, you're going to have fewer competitors. I promise you. Okay. So what are you going to do to make sure that you're one of the companies still in business down the road? You have to be innovative. You're going to have to be, bold. If it's online training, it's online training. Just do it better than anyone else is doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like once again, like one of the upsides of this is like nothing has to be perfect, and you've got the like greatest excuse in the world. Well, we can't do that. We can't be in person. So this is what we're going to do. And I think that just like not getting like, I don't think any of us can get stuck on, well, this is what we do, because everything, it actually all has to change. We have to be flexible in that.
And Jim, I think you have a unique opportunity to sell the benefit of doing this work now, while some workforces are on lower hours or, you know, are sitting at home with a little bit more of a bandwidth than they would maybe if they were in the office. So I think you could kind of change your pitch a little bit right now to take advantage of that with the kind of work that you're doing.
And I had this conversation, I'm just going to keep talking to you, Jim, for a second. So I had this conversation with Camber earlier today, and Aparna from the Avarna group was on our Inside Voices happy hour last Thursday. And one of the things that keeps getting brought up is like, we cannot let equity or diversity, equity, and inclusion fall to the wayside in our work. And there's a big concern that as companies sort of look toward strictly a bottom line, that all of these other initiatives that we've been fostering in the outdoor community and beyond are just going to get cut. That is going to reflect poorly on brands and businesses, and consumers will remember how they act today. So this is you can go ahead and cut all of that, or you could not prioritize this work, but don't think that people aren't paying attention. And I think that that's sort of the sell, that's the pitch, is that actually now more than ever, relationships and people are more important than anything else. And so this work is critical. So that's what I would say. What was I going to say? Oh, well, keep having the questions come through. I'm just gonna go there. When is it time to just close up shop? When is it time to just say, I'm done, this isn't gonna work? So Emily's question was, how do I keep pushing every day? My question is, when do you decide to stop?
I'll start.
No,
go ahead, Byron.
There, of course. I'll come back to the future P&Ls. Like two things that, okay, so I thought I was going to lose my business for a full year. Like every month I thought, I'm just hanging on. And so the things that were I had some stop gaps in place, meaning if X happens, boom, I'm shutting it down. And for me, it was one, running out of cash. Okay. But it was more like, if I'm going to run out of cash in a week or two, that way, because if you run out of cash last week, it can spill over into your personal financial situation as well. So you have to be careful with that. But if my P&L, if I could build out a P&L forecast and it showed there was some future in it, then I would stay in business. At any point, I couldn't build a P&L forecast to show break even or profitability. That's also when I said I would shut it down, because, and I wouldn't do it that day. I would do it, I would brainstorm. I talk to friends. I would find a way, because sometimes you get into a negative state of mind when you're doing the P&L. But after a week, if I can't create a P&L forecast that's going to get me to break even, I have to take a serious look at the business.
Yeah. I was working on my financials last night, and the minute, I'll have energy and I can do it. The minute I start to get really tired, I will stop and say I have to come back to it, because it's not a place to make mistakes, and it's not a place to not have focus. So I like that you said, so this is something to revisit, to be working on your financials every day versus thinking that this is a project that you have to tackle all at once, because it can be really overwhelming. And it is once you get some of the raw numbers down, the scenarios is actually incredibly creative thinking that you have to put into that, which oftentimes we don't think about how financial, CFOs are creative thinkers. And so, it takes you have to be rested, and you need to have the space to be able to do that.
And everybody's going to have a different tolerance for risk. And so, when you run out of cash and what's comfortable for you is going to be different than when Byron is going to run out of cash, and that's going to be comfortable for him versus Jen versus me. So, you can take advice, you can seek advice, but at the end of the day, you have to decide what that risk tolerance is. Because you definitely don't want it to come over and hit on your personal side. Sometimes there isn't a difference for people. Their personal finances are their business finances. And so understanding that for yourself and kind of what line you want to draw. The point too is that just because you might have failure, like failure is, I guess, in my opinion, is when you stop trying. And so if trying is, you know what, I have to kind of put this on hold right now because I need to pay bills and have food on the table, our new expectation for our lives just has to shift right now. And so I hope we get to come back to the expectations we had before March, you know, but right now, closing shop isn't failure. Closing shop might be the successful story for you in your life. And you might be able to reopen. You've done it before. Maybe you just need to take a break so that you can get through this and then you can start again.
I have a question, another one. I'm just going to keep throwing out questions till all of you put more in here. How much would you involve your customers in decisions around pivoting? So like if like for us at Coalition, we have a really strong community. And so would you go to your community and say, hey, here are the things that we've been thinking about doing. What do you think? I mean, this is also called market research. So it's, you know, like I think ultimately it's a smart thing to do, but that's my opinion. Curious what the two of you think about transparency with your community, with your customers, with your clients, and tapping and getting their feedback on what they think would be a different path forward for you.
Well,
Sarah.
Okay. I mean, we can ping pong. So if you want to
Sure.
take it after I've taken, like, I don't want to step on toes, but I'm always going to have an opinion. So I think it's okay. I lean a little bit more towards having a core group of people that you do that with that are your customers instead of like a public Facebook outcry kind of thing. But that is part personal preference in terms of how I would want to go about it and how I would advise people to go about it. Cause I think you're just going to get you're going to get a lot more valuable feedback than maybe the kind of the random response. And so kind of picking a core group that you value, that's diverse, do a virtual focus group basically around the ideas. And it's the same process as maybe you would have done before you started the business in the first place.
Yeah, I just take off from what Sarah said and focus there. You know, the 80-20 rule is super important because most likely 20% of your customers make up 80% of your revenue. Ask them what they want. They're also easier customers to deal with. They're more engaged with you. They like you more. You're going to get better quality answers, not what you want to hear, but better quality, true answers. And where the other 80% of your customers, they're usually whiners and more difficult and take more of your time, and I can keep going on this. And so focus on that 20% because they'll give you higher quality answers and be able to help you along the way.
Great. I'm going to keep asking questions if all you don't. Susie's question is, how do you identify those 20%?
Well, it depends on your business. But usually it's tapping into your sales platform. For an e-commerce store, for example, it's Shopify. Something in your business will give you the data that shows who are your biggest well, again, it depends. If you're retail, I guess you're not going to know, right? People come in and they don't register when they buy something necessarily. So maybe a challenge for some businesses, but generally if you're an online business of any kind, you'll have that data. If not, maybe you can do a little survey, make it easy, whatever you do, even if you're online business, use SurveyMonkey, keep it to 3 questions or 4 questions, very simple. And when you're asking, say, 5-minute survey, you'll get a lot of people clicking and wanting to take a 5-minute survey. And one last thing with surveys is don't ask open-ended questions, or if you do, expect it to take you a long time to get through the material. So I'm not saying not to, but when we do a survey, we can get thousands of people giving us answers. And if we have to read each one, that's difficult. So we have multiple choice.
Yeah, I am just to let everyone know. So we're going to actively engage in this. And what I'm doing is actually segmenting out my email list of who are the people who open and click through in emails the most. So these are people who are highly engaged, who are may not be on the customer side of things, but they're definitely a part of the brand. And so I'm looking at how I can segment my emails to send different messages to people. And what I do with surveys, same thing. Like the only open-ended question that I normally offer is the very last one, which is optional, which says, is there anything else you want to tell us? Otherwise, it's always like, because I just want to be able to analyze the data. Sensi has a question. Any other tips for evaluating and implementing long-term strategic plans, especially in this time of uncertainty?
Long-term is, I would say, how are you thinking of long-term? That would be my first question. Are you thinking, 3 months? Are you thinking 6 months? Are you thinking 18 months? I mean, normally a long-term strategic plan could be up to 10 years or, thereabouts. So I think
thinking 1 to 2 years, just so you know.
1 to 2 years. Thanks. Okay. Yeah. 1 to 2 years, which is, it's funny to say long-term around right now. Like the 1 to 2 years is not really what we would have said long-term before this. So I think it goes back to, I don't think it's any different than kind of what we said kind of in the beginning, which is have a 1-year plan as if things don't change from today. Have a 1-year plan as if things go back to where they were before this started. And have a 1-year plan for whatever reality you can imagine that's somewhere in between that. And those are your scenarios you can start working with. And then as it plays out, you can kind of latch on to one and shift it a little bit. But this is our challenge right now. It is. Yeah, craziness. It is. And I think as someone who's in that work and working with someone right now in that, we're picking little dates. Okay, we're going to do an interim plan between now and a week from now. And if something changes to push our course in a certain way, we're going to shift a week from now and we're going to make a new interim plan. So it's kind of like, if you hate planning, this is your hell, because you just have to plan for the unknown, and the unknown means you have to make a lot of plans.
Yeah, real quick, I talked about my downturn and then creating a turnaround plan and coming out of it. I'd love to tell you it was month 1 we created this turnaround plan and executed it exactly the way it was. Hell no. We created this turnaround plan and then pivot. So it took new form almost every month at the beginning. And so long-term planning right now is going to be very difficult. Just expect whatever plan you have, it will change. But one thing I will say is do have a when the market returns plan, okay, whatever that means to you. And it won't be normal, but what happens when it returns, and it returns even bigger than it was before. My point is have a list of, here's our wish list of things that we're going to do as projects or investments or R&D when the market comes roaring back. And that does 2 things. One, it gets you ready because I had that plan, and here's my market, my mini market going way up, and we're executing all those plans perfectly. But it also helps you focus and just have this vision of the future that is bright. And it just psychologically helps you get through those tough days of, at least I'm focusing 5% or 10% of my time on the end goal a year from now. And here's what it's going to look like. You do have to have that in your head. Even if it's not a P&L forecast, it's the vision that you have in your head. And that'll get you through some of those tough moments.
Byron, Susie has a question for you. She's curious what helped to keep you going with all of those pivots. Was there anything fun or exciting about it?
It's so strange because now that's over, I really admire, I'm so appreciative of that turnaround time. The worst days I have great gratitude towards. And so now I look back and yeah, I'm glad it happened to me in my business, my industry. Best thing that could have happened. Unfortunately, going through it sucks. So if anything I can share with you is that when it is over, you'll look back and look at it and be proud of yourself and like what you see. Going through it is tough. By the way, a side note, so I'm writing a book on the turnaround process, and it's not going to be out for a while. But over half the book is just on the emotional, surviving it emotionally, because it's a shitstorm, right? And so you do have to have a lot of strategies to get through it, whether it's meditation, working out is super important, journaling, and most importantly, talking to people. And that does two things. One, it gets it out of your head. And so it's a real, benefit for you psychologically. But also you're going to get feedback from the people you're talking to. And that's going to help you kind of create that turnaround plan for yourself.
I think it's helpful too to have different groups of people to talk to. So there's like your core team to talk to, but then you also might have advisors. That's another team to talk to. You might have a board. You might have these focus groups. And I think actually like trying to talk to these different groups who are going to have really different perspectives would be probably pretty important during all of that.
Absolutely. And listening, because you'll start to see trends. You'll start to connect the dots of, and it could have been your neighbor who has no idea what you do for business, but gave you this idea. And that idea by itself isn't that great, but that idea with these other two ideas from my other friends or people I talk to may combine into some really amazing strategies for your business. So really be open-minded to a lot. I always believed that the universe would bring me the ideas, and it did. It just brought it through friends and people and ideas that I connected together.
We have another question here. I think what I like about this question is that it's talking about like immediate cash flow. It's from Stefani. I've seen a lot of product-based companies doing sales. Is that tacky or helpful, or even realistic if sales have stopped? Is that indicative that a sale isn't a good way to go? So thoughts on sales.
I guess I kind of need a little clarification on that question. Do you mean the sale of the company, or do you mean that they're still trying to sell their product?
I think selling product and offering at a discount.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the product, I think to me, that's not tacky to still be trying to move your business forward. It's not that, and I'm not trying to assume or put words in your mouth, Stefani, but when I think of that scenario, I'm thinking, well, even though we're at home, we still might want something that we want shipped to us. So depending on the product, I think that makes sense. We're still living, we're just living differently and in more of proximity around our homes. And in some cases, we're scrambling, and some of those things might be helpful to us, again, depending on what the product is. So I wouldn't hesitate as advising a product-based company to still sell. I mean, Industry 9 is still shipping product like nothing happened. I mean, they're not getting the sales, but they're catching up on their backlog that they had. And people are grateful to be getting their super expensive mountain bike wheels right now, but certainly that's a percentage of the population that can even afford it. So no, I would say I don't feel it's tacky, but I do think there is a humble way to do it. And so I don't think you should be attacking that part of your business the same way you did before March.
Absolutely. And this was something that we spoke about on the first call with Amanda, and we're happy to talk about it more, that your messaging has to change. So you have to, Jim's exactly right. Tone is important. What you say, how you say it. There are certain brands, whether it's in the outdoor industry or lifestyle, who are just going on like business as usual. People are noticing that, and it's not going well. So you have to sort of acknowledge what's happening. I know for us, we are off, we always do a pre-sale in the spring. And what we're saying is like, we're a small business and this is what we do. Yeah. And by doing this, we get to stay in business, and being like really clear about that. This isn't, no one's making daily trips to the bank You know, like this is really about like, we're going to continue to keep doing our work. Byron, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll just take off from what you said. I think being vulnerable and letting them know what's going on. You know, don't ignore what's going on. That's the most important thing. Bring it up. And personally, I would hit the, you know, help a small business, you know, through these times, and you're going to get great gear at discounted prices, or whatever the messaging is. But just being vulnerable and like, you know, hey, it's been difficult for us. We do have a way forward. And with your help, we can do that to get things kicked off. We're doing a liquidation sale. This will help raise cash for the business, which is needed for the next 3 months. Just be honest, and they can feel it. And I think most of those emails or messages should be written by the owner and CEO, because you will come across way different than your copywriter will. That's important.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that now making those decisions doesn't devalue your product or your brand. Like, discounting is, I don't even know how to put this into words, but before you may have thought, I can't discount my product, or we don't discount our products because that devalues us in the marketplace. Well, guess what? You may not even have any competition if you get through this. So you may be the only thing that is out there. So I wouldn't hesitate to do some of those tactics. Now, do it tactfully, and like you said, do it with authenticity and from the right person and with the right tone. But you're not devaluing yourself if that is an avenue for you to stay in business. At least from my perspective, and with some of the brands that I'm working with.
Yeah, and you're seeing this at a large scale. Like if you look at like Everlane, Madewell, some like really, and clearly you all know where I buy my clothing now. They don't do sales, like they don't, you know, and now they're offering sales, and they are talking about like, you know, this is what we need to do. And I think also, like, to some extent, like if there's things that you need or things that you want, like getting it on sale right now is the best thing for everyone, because we all have a little bit less in the bank, you know? So Raquel has a question, and I'm going to take this as the last question since it's almost 4. And then after this question, I want to talk a little bit about next week. So Raquel's question is, along a similar vein, how have you communicated your pivots when you've done them?
Communicated to customers then, I'm assuming, let's say?
Yes.
Well, again, it depends on the type of business. You know, for us, it usually comes via email to our customer base. And so in the subject line, put CEO update or owner update or whatever, just to grab their attention. And then we usually do it by email. If we can do it by some other webinar or something like that, that may be a good way.
Mm-hmm. And is it like how much are you communicating?
I wouldn't do that more than once. Personally, I do a CEO update because just the world's going crazy. Every 2 weeks. I don't do it more than that.
That's great. So. Awesome. Well,
and I think there's just one more point maybe to that, which is you don't have to sound desperate when this is happening. Like if you're selling or you're discounting or you're pivoting, having that authentic, real, hey, this is what we're doing, and spinning it into what you're hopeful for, because you're doing it with hope. You're not doing it 100% out of desperation, right? If you didn't have the hope, you wouldn't be doing it at all. So in my opinion, lean on that hopeful side of your messaging, not covering up the fact that you have that this is a need, and that, you know, that you're still being transparent and authentic with where you are. But the message can still be spun in a hopeful way, which will hopefully inspire your customers to want to continue to support you.
And I think they want to hear that you have a plan. So using those words, we have a plan to get us through the next year. And this pivot is a part of that plan. So that's saying it with confidence, I think.
Can you tweet that at our president right now?
What's that?
You ask him to come up with a plan and share it with the nation?
My plan?
No, his plan. Having a plan.
Uh,
Having a
Yeah.
plan is really
Yeah, different topic there.
yeah. So what was I just gonna say? I lost it.
Can I say, I know we're running late. I just, if there's an exercise I would think would be the most powerful thing that you guys could do, it would be this: brainstorm. How could this be a good thing for your business in a couple of years? That you got to do that in a couple of year part, otherwise it won't work. And list out 20, 30 things. Might want to do it with a drink and, a couple drinks in you too, and really go, how can this be good for you? Because it can be. This is an industry, this is, disruption creates a ton of opportunity, but it's so hard to see it when you're in the midst of it. It's just blurry and confusing and scary as shit. So just list out 20, 30 things. How could this be good for your business in a couple of years?
Any other exercises that you would suggest that everyone participates in?
I have several of them actually, but one thing is, if you can find small increments that help you, say 10%, I'll give you some fuzzy math. 10%, 10% times 4 things equals 50%. Okay. Because if you adjust your margins 10%, okay, that's not a lot. And if you cut your expenses by 10% and you reduce whatever labor costs and you increase the revenue, if you get 4 of those together, you'll probably see a 50% bump. So don't think there's one guiding thing that's going to change everything in your business. It's most likely a handful of smaller things that's going to get you through this. So what are those small handful of things?
Yeah.
And I would add that on kind of the side of knowing and learning your resources, you may have been the person before that resisted help or didn't think you would ever be the person who needed help. And right now you have a lot of people willing to give you help, whether it's your small business groups in your towns or your cities or your counties. It's okay to take advantage of these things right now and let go of that side of you that might have been resistant to the help. There's a lot of folks willing. There's several groups here that I'm working with and volunteering with, and the small businesses are benefiting greatly from not just doing this alone, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. And Susie commented earlier, to Susie's point, a lot of this, like, it's not failure, it's being creative. Like, this is a chance to communicate with your community how creative you are in response to a crisis. Well, I want to thank Sarah and Byron for joining us today and sharing all of this. In the email that I send out afterwards, I'll link to both of their websites so that you can contact them directly if you have other questions, and reach out to them. Hope that's okay. I didn't ask either one of you if that was okay,
Yeah,
but that just happened. Okay, great. And for next week, I want to do a conversation about creative fundraising, but I've yet to talk to anybody who has great ideas about creative fundraising because the demand is so great and everyone's trying to figure out what to do. So I have a request for all of you. If you have ideas on creative fundraising, or you know somebody who would be a great addition as a co-host, will you email me, please? And let me know, because that's what I'd like to talk about next week. Also, just feel free to email me if you have other things that you would like to discuss. But I think that the money part is probably everyone's biggest concern. And so trying to be a little bit specific about that next week is something that I'd like to do. I also want to just thank all of you for being here. Thank you for all of you who are thanking us, but thank all of you for being here and being a part of this community. And thanks to Susie for setting up our Zoom every week and getting us going. I will be sending you an email. If you're not getting the emails because you're not, it's because you probably at some point unsubscribed to Coalition. No hard feelings, I don't really care. There's just too many of you to send it from my personal email, so it goes through our ESP. So if you're not getting the emails, just ping me personally and I can add you back in. And I just also want to let you know that tomorrow for our happy hour on Instagram at 5 o'clock, Jenny Brousseau from Unlikely Hikers is going to be joining us. Go look them up on Instagram, Unlikely Hikers, Jenny Brousseau. And next week, Lila Leatherman will be talking about resiliency. So those are our Instagram happy hours, which are a little less business focused and more on the community side. So thanks again, Sarah and Byron. It's really helpful to have you on this call, and thanks to all of you, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.